And then I'm going to turn it over to you to get started.
All right. Hi guys, how you doing? You know, it's great to see y'all, and glad you could be with us this Christmas week. I appreciate you taking the time. What I want to cover today is not really a TTI thing. It's a chip thing, and it's a way that I've made a lot of money over the course of the last 20 years, probably maybe over the course of last 18 years. And so does anybody on the call do 360s? Okay, Tom does kind of, but
I
nobody
try
else.
not to actually, but sometimes I need, and sometimes they're appropriate and what have you. So I come with an open mind, but let me just state for those that are here and those that haven't heard my rant on this. There are a couple assumptions with 360s, which you need to make sure are true for them to be successful in my experience. Number one, there's an assumption that the feedback is anonymous. Totally anonymous, and that's really not true. And so you want to avoid it being a situation where I had a client.
Hey, Tom.
What's that?
Tom, can you wait until we
Sure.
finish with this?
Okay.
Because I think those are apt, but they're not as apt in this case.
This is your show. Please proceed.
Well, thanks, Tom. Because I have a lot of the same trepidations that you did. And I've learned a lot over the last 15 or 18 years about the application of 360s. So this goes back to some learning that I got. I had a friend of mine that was one of the General Electric HR managers under Welch, and he was fairly highly placed. He had retired. And we were talking one day, and he said, "Do you do 360s?" And I said, "Yeah, well, yeah." And he said, "I'll teach you how to do them." And he was getting $25,000 per 360 at the time. So his was more of an executive evaluation, and that's what I've always called mine, is more of an executive evaluation. I've never had the cojones to ask for $25,000 for one of those. My price has been between 5 and 15,000, and probably a lot more closer to the maybe approaching 10,000. And I approach 360s a different way. So the standard 360. Hey, Mr. Brown. The standard 360 is I think intellectually bereft, and as Tom was starting to state, have a really difficult time with confidentiality. So the typical 360 that most people are familiar with is one that uses a survey instrument, and with the survey instrument, there can be I've seen as many as 35 or 40 raters. And a rater is someone that's going to rate the person that is doing it. It's usually split down demographically into peers or subordinates or supervisors, but basically what happens is you take the survey, they conglomerate all the results, they supposedly put some science to it, and they feed back all the results. So you get a report that's 10 or 12 pages, and they have all kinds of written comments, and you know damn well who made the written comments. So I never really liked that model, because I started off debriefing them, and there were a couple of things that I found out. One is that everybody knew what everybody else was saying. Second is that all of the information that I got was old information. It was people telling stories about the subject that were a year old or 2 years old or 5 years old. So I wanted to take and ramp that up. So there are three parts of the 360, or the executive evaluation, that I use. The first part is I use a survey instrument from TTI. It's in OD Surveys Plus. I'll share the questions that I ask with. I only use 34 questions, 34 rated questions, and 4 fill-in-the-blank questions. and I'll share with you the reports that I get back for those surveys. I also use the Trimetrics HD, the stress quotient, and the emotional quotient, because I want the inputs from what they tell themselves about themselves in the report. And then the third part is that a subset of the raters, I actually interview a subset of the raters. So there's two interviews that I do, or two sets of interviews I do. The one interview I do is of the subject themselves, and that's more for biographical information. I'll share you what I've written on one. This is a current client of mine, and you know, I'll share what I do for Haskell, because I do probably anywhere between 10 and 15 a year for Haskell. But I also interview a subset of the raters. So I usually talk to their boss. I usually talk to a couple of peers. I usually talk to a couple of subordinates. Some of the subjects have had me talk to their spouses. I thought that was an interesting take. Some have had me talk to external customers. What I find is I get better information from the spouses, and I get very little information, because usually they pick the customer that likes them, and usually the customer says, "Oh, they're great, they're wonderful, everything's wonderful." So what I do then is I take the inputs from all three sources and I write a report. So that gets back to your anonymity thing, Tom. Everything is filtered through me. And so what I do is if I hear one statement about somebody, I usually don't report on that, because it's somebody that's, you know, got a grudge or you know, is bearing some kind of ill will. If I hear comments from two places, it's kind of like, yeah, there's smoke. If I hear comments from three or more places, then I really know that I've got a point, and I'm going to want to burrow in on that. So let me share with you a couple things, and Wendy was going to send a couple things out as well. But the first thing is, hold on just a second.
Hey, Chip.
Yeah.
Do we have time for one question now, or do you want me to hold it?
We got time for any questions you want to ask. Doug,
So
if you want to ask a question.
One of the things I always wonder about is knowing that we have our own biases, but you know, in terms of the acumen piece, how do we make sure that what we're creating as the document is in fact not biased by our own EQ, not our own EQ score, but by our own ACI scores?
Wow.
Okay,
Nobody's
my
ever
work
asked,
here is
nobody's
done.
nobody's ever asked that question before, and you know, nobody's ever questioned my veracity. So you know, I don't think that's you know, other than another practitioner. You know, that's a great question, and I sometimes wonder about that. You know, I try to be as fair as I can, and most of the people that I'm doing 360s on, I know and I coach, so it's, you know, it's easy to uncover. But I've had a couple situations where I've had really rough feedback, and you just have to let the feedback be the feedback. Here's another thing that I would say about that is none of the feedback that I'm giving is my own. It's somebody else's feedback, so I don't own the feedback.
Yeah, what prompted me to ask the question, because again, I don't lay awake at night trying to play Stump the Band, was that when I used to.
Are you kidding? You really do. I think you do.
When I was using a lot the in the implementation manual, giving things to bosses and ask them to rate how their subordinates were doing. what I was finding a lot was when I would read their answer was really colored by their own bias in terms of what they thought was important and what they thought was not important. But that's really driven by their ACI score. So somebody who's quote unquote soft on people could get hammered by somebody who's a high D. And so my thing would, yeah, well, this guy's really weak when it comes to people concerned. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I could be inadvertently writing their bias into what I'm writing. So I was just
that's fair enough. And depending on the company, because I've been involved with probably 5 or 6 different companies that do 360s, other coaches, other people that do 360s. There was one company that's here in Charlotte that charged a lot more than I do, but was working with one exec, and it was almost like they fell in love with that exec, and the 360 results showed them that they fell in love with that exec, and everybody else who was in the debrief with them went, "We know you've fallen in love." So, you know, I guess it's going back to my creed as a coach, and the lack of bias as far as my creed as a coach. Does that make sense, Doug?
Yeah, it does. It's just probably one of those things that it's just gonna be kind of ramped up in my mind and make sure that we're not becoming, in our zeal to kind of capture what is and not to your point, not allow one-offs to kind of color what the final report looks like.
Well,
just kind of make sure that we're looking at it through, hey, if I have a tendency to be, high empathy, making sure that I'm doing something to consciously take my own biases into consideration when I'm creating the finished product for somebody.
There's 2 points that I just thought about. Is first of all, I don't own the data. Second of all, and I don't own the results. And second of all, they don't work for me. And so I'm an unbiased third party that comes in from the outside. I'm there to help, and you can't help if you're not honest.
Well, so Doug, I really like your observation and your question. And it would seem to me that maybe as coaches, we could devise almost like a little checklist. Like say, if I'm high D, are my comments reflecting a neutral behavior style? If I'm an altruist, are my comments reflecting a neutral motivator style? And maybe like a series of 6 questions you would ask yourself before you give any feedback to the customer, not just 360s, Chip, but I'm thinking about all of the coaching and all of the inputs I make. And as a coach, you're not supposed to make inputs, but guess what? We all do.
Sure.
That would be kind of a neat thing to have, something to kind of, think about. Anyway, thank you, Doug.
Okay. Any other questions before I get back to it? I can always count on Doug for giving me something to think about. So what I want to share is this is the interview guide that I use for Haskell. I have other ones that I use for other companies, but these are some basic questions that I ask, and usually it's about a 35-minute to an hour interview, and so certainly these aren't the only questions, but I'm going to ask a lot of questions about career, what the schooling was. I want to know what their story is. I want to be able to tell their story the best possible way. So how about the career? What are your key projects? And then mentors and influencers. And this is stuff that Wendy's going to send to everybody. And then what do you consider your greatest strengths as a leader? What do you see as your areas for improvement? So the reason I asked those last 2 questions is because I want to see what they think are their strengths and what they think they need to work on. because usually if I see that from all of the inputs from everybody else, then I'm going to have a pretty good idea that that is, that they're pretty self-aware and they know what the heck's going on. If I see that it doesn't match at all, then we've got another problem. So that's the first one. The other sheet that I use is this, which is just a one-pager, and these are the interviews that I give to the subjects or to the raters. So the raters are going to go on and fill out the survey, and they're going to do the electronic part, but they're also going to talk to me, and these are the interviews that I use. So it's just, again, the interview, if I'm not getting anything from the rater, then it's going to be a real short interview. If I'm getting something from the rater, then we're going to have a lot more talk. And these questions just are the ones that I'm going to ask basically, but being a coach and just like so many of you are, probably going to ask a couple other questions as well.
Do you tailor this, Chip, based on whether you're interviewing a spouse or a customer?
Yeah, but I've been doing it so long, so I just, I kind of do it on the fly. And there's a couple of them, like I was just doing, excuse me, my dog wants to get out. I was just doing a series on the group presidents for Haskell, and they're all coaching clients of mine. And so, and most of the people that I was interviewing, I know. And so instead of going through all the questions, I say, okay, so what do I need to know about Frank?
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you ask them, because you said before that a lot of times they come up with old information, do you ask them to say, only tell me things that happened in the last year?
No, I just let them go.
Like that?
I just let them go because I'm going to pick up the sense of it rather than the actual words. I mean, if somebody tells the same story that three other people do, then I know that's an important story. But I always wonder if that's a story that is being told at one level of the organization. I'll give you an example. Way back in the day, I was doing a 360 on someone, and everybody at corporate told a story about this person. Nobody had witnessed the story, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen in the field. So it was supposedly a field story, but none of his subordinates knew anything about the story. So it was a story that was told to corporate that was limiting this person's rise, and it wasn't true, and nobody was there to witness it. So when you find out those things, then you say, okay, so what we got to do as a person's coach is to change the story. Okay.
Hey Chip,
I brought it up because you said that, well, because somebody might make a change, like they might have been coached by you or somebody else, and they might have increased their emotional intelligence or whatever, and I guess you want to find out the nuances of how people have changed or what has been the most recent changes. And I take it you explore all that, right?
Yeah, I did. In 2011, I did the first 3 executive evaluations for Haskell. One of the guys is now the COO. He was a division leader at the time. I've done 5 360s on him in the last 10 years. And so they want to get new 360s every 2 or 3 years on their executives. And so you have an opportunity to see what has changed and what story has changed, and then you can judge your coaching from there. That's a great question. Thanks, Jerry. Doug, you wanted to ask something?
Would you reflash what you just had up on the screen?
I can, but I just cancel it out. Hold on just a second.
Chip, I guess I'm really looking for the on that the first question, the second part. How do you interact? What are those interactions like? What are you listening for?
I want to know whether the interactions are professional, whether they are effective, whether they're, if some guy's a jerk, I just, I want to know that, or if some person is a jerk, if they're cold and cruel, if they're, just what are the interactions like? One particular person that I recently did, it's a person who would, when asked what time it was, would tell you how to make a clock, would tell you about the clockmaker, would tell you about the town in Germany where the clock was made, and would spend 45 minutes telling you about that. I picked that up well, and I work with him now, and he is like that. Yeah, but that I picked that up in that question.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yep.
And I figure you would probably appreciate the question, more of a leader or more of a manager.
I do. How much? I wonder how often. Well, considering most of these guys are guys you're already coaching, they probably understand that distinction. But I could see, for a whole bunch of other people, us having to kind of help people understanding those distinctions and then asking the question. But I'm just anticipating what happens, what might be going on.
Believe it or not, people make up their own definitions, and so then the question is, why do you say that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now the thing that I want to share with you next is probably the best way to do this. So I'm going to share. This is one of the reports that I get for Haskell. So there's 4 different reports that I get from Haskell, or from TTI. And this is based on the 34 questions, the 34 rated questions, and the 4 written comments. There's a favorable, unfavorable report. There's a mean comparison report, and there's a frequency distribution report. So let me share with us the favorable, unfavorable first. So in this particular person's case, it's not very exciting. There's a couple that I've had that are really kind of rough. But what this report does is this says, okay, there are 18 respondents, and out of the 18 respondents, there was 1 self, 1 manager, 7 peers, and 9 direct reports. And so that's all split up by the bars. What this tells you is, like looking at question number 2, delegates assignment in a timely fashion, 11% of the direct reports, so this is on a 6-point like scale, the favorable means that they were rated as a 5 or 6, the neutral means they were rated as a 3 or 4, and the unfavorable means they were rated as a 1 or a 2. Now this person doesn't have any 1 or 2s in their report. Frank is an incredible guy, and I just really enjoy him. But direct reports, his 11%, or what does that work out to be, about maybe one person, said that they were neutral on delegates assignments in a timely fashion. So what I'm looking for here is I'm looking for some of those unfavorables. If I'm seeing a bunch of unfavorables in the questions, then I'm going to have a pretty good understanding that there's either a codicil of people that are not really liking, or if I see like a bunch of unfavorables, then those are the areas that I'm going to hone in on in the written comments and the interviews. Okay. So these are the questions I ask, and I'm just going to kind of scroll through them, and I'll be happy to send the questions. But there's 34 of them, and they go into performance management. There's 7 questions on innovation.
Yep. Are these TTI questions that if we bought the 360 from TTI, they would come out?
Well, TTI is in the process of changing things with the OD surveys, but there were like 3,000 questions I could choose from for the survey.
Oh, okay, okay. So you tailor it. Okay, got it.
And I tailored it, or you can ask your own questions. But you can see there's some areas that he's got a little bit rougher in. There's 12 questions on teamwork, but there's nothing that is unfavorable in his. He hit himself really hard on makes a point of celebrating superior team accomplishments. Everybody else feels like he's okay. And there's 2 questions on communication for results, 2 questions on communications dialogue, and the last 6 questions are integrity. Now, when this survey goes out, they're randomized, so they're not, these are the questions on integrity. They're completely randomized. So that's what comes up as the unfavorable, favorable, and that gives me a great idea of out of the people that are involved, what are the hitches in the get along? Because the other report, this is called the mean score report. The mean score is going to tell me what the mean score is. Right? So I have no idea out of when I look at associates are held accountable for the work they do, I have no idea if in the peers it's rated 5.43. Does that mean that everybody rates him 5s or 6s, or are there a couple of people that rate him as 2s? So that's why I look at the favorable unfavorable report as well. The other report is the frequency distribution report, and I don't use that as much, but this tells you the raw numbers. Oh. And so, associates are held accountable. Well, out of the peer rating, 3 said 6, 4 said 5. So if you really want to know the numbers, you can know the numbers. I think the favorable unfavorable does a better job of graphically giving me that information. And then the written comment. So I ask 4 written questions. What about this person do you find admirable? What are 3 things the person does very well? What characteristics keep this person from being as successful as possible? And what are 3 things this person should work on to be a more effective leader? This is the raw information that comes back from the surveys. I never share these raw comments. It's just, it would drive me crazy to read these raw comments, because again, somebody can be really rude to someone or have a bug up their butt about it on a particular day, and it doesn't deserve to make it to the final report. So let's take a look at what that final report is. So there are 3 sections basically. There's areas of strength, there's areas for development. I should have picked another one. Let me pick another one, because this was like the 5th 360 that I've done for Manjin. So let me pick another one that has the. This is a little bit more fun because this was done on someone that that rated himself in the survey as all 6s. Let that sink in for a minute. He rated himself as all sixes. He didn't know he was going to be busted out, and it was so funny. So the three major portions is areas of strength, areas for development, and then I put a self-description. So that's the base. That's what I do for the interview that I do for the rater. And then what I do is put a copy, or cut and paste the assessment results in. So this particular person, it's got major points. So the major points are the black bullets, and there are sub points that build my case under with the opaque bullets. So it's, Dave's widely reported to be an excellent marker. There's a number of statements under that I got from my interviews as well as from the written comments. And then for him, Dave appears to have a high need to be perfect. A few comments were made about his seeming arrogance and the need for him to be humble. In the survey, he ranked himself as all 6 out of 6. Apparently, he sees no need to improve in any area. I thought you would appreciate that. So that's the 360 process that I use. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I've made a lot of money off of this over the years, and I try to address some of the privacy concerns that Tom brought up. Tom, go ahead and hit your points.
No, actually, I wanted to go back to that last person, who the 6 of 6 guy.
Yeah.
What was on his dimensional balance? What was his sense of self? I didn't catch it.
It was pretty high. Yeah, it was pretty. He's an interesting guy. He's the head of marketing, and a very interesting person. And I love him to death. But God, you just have to keep your BS meter high with him. So
the other thing which you have kind of filtered out is the people with a bug up their butt. That can mess up a 360 process, but it seems like you have a nice handle on it.
Yeah, and if I'm hearing it a lot of times, there was, okay, so for Haskell, it is, even if it's really bad feedback, it's for the person's development. It's not to fire them. I've seen weaponized 360s before.
Yeah, yes.
Where the whole point of doing a 360 is get rid of somebody. I've done a few of them. I refuse to do any more, because after about 3 of them, you finally, it gets through the thick skull, and I realize that it's just to fire somebody. And
you're the hitman.
So, yeah, and why do I want to do that? But there's only been 2 instances where a person was either let go or fell on their sword after a 360. The rest of the time, a lot of the people are still there, and I end up working with them to a great degree to help them get past it. So, any questions?
So I'm getting from this that when you write up the final report, all you're really doing is writing up their strengths, their areas for development, and the self-description, and then you include stuff from their talent insights report. And
it's 10 pages and 5 pages of graph. Yeah.
Okay. So you don't include any recommendations. You don't include any other kinds of forward-looking things.
Now, okay, so let me put it in the context of the whole process. So I get the word that they want to do a 360 on someone. The chief HR officer calls me or emails me, says we're going to do a 360, and I get that set up with TTI, and then I send a really long email. I'll be happy to send what I send. But I send a really long email that says, here's what the process is, here's what we're going to do. It's going to take a couple of months to get through it. I've had somebody actually get through one in 3 weeks, but most of the time it's 2 months to do the whole process. And then the vetting process for raters starts between that person and that person's boss, and then I do the report. And the upshot of it is I do a 90-minute debrief with the subject of the 360. So it's a 90-minute session where I explain things. Sometimes I have to talk people down from the ledge, but it's where it's basically a coaching conversation that's about 90 minutes. It's explaining the graphs if they've never been through trimetrics before. It's just going through all the raw information. And the upshot of it is, okay, where do you want to go with this? And then I have a meeting, a 60-minute debrief with the person and the person's boss or bosses. And they used to be all in person, but now they're all on Zoom. But the whole conversation is I high spot the 360. It maybe takes a minute and a half to high spot the 360. But I said, at this point, you've read it. Everybody has read it. It's time for you to have a discussion. And the discussion is, okay, the 360 tells you about the past. It tells you what has gone on. Now let's talk about the future. So Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so, you want to be COO. What do you have to do to get there? What kind of things in your development? What kind of places do you have to be? And
so you have that with the bosses, or
yeah.
it's back with the subject?
No, with the bosses. So we say, okay, what's the path forward?
Mm-hmm.
I just had one that the person was, first of all, took no responsibility for the content of the information at all, blamed everything else on a coworker, and about 30 minutes into the conversation with the person's two bosses and the person, I finally said, "Hey guys, you're not hitting the point." And I said to the subject, I said, this is a conversation about you. It's not about so and so. This person didn't cause all your problems. So when are you going to own the information? And I had a very direct conversation, which I'm getting very good at direct conversations.
So that 60-minute meeting includes the subject as well,
Yeah.
as the
Oh, yeah.
bosses.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, all right. That's what I didn't get.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't explain it correctly then. But yeah, it includes the bosses and boss or bosses and the subject. Bob, I can't hear you. You're muted.
There are two meetings, one with the subject and one with the subject and boss.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, and that's why these are worth so much. And to a great degree, there a lot of coaching interactions start with a 360. So there have been times when I price it into the coaching. So if I might charge 15 grand for a year of coaching, then I'm going to add 15 for the 360 and just make it a package. Any other questions? God, I'm that good. All right. Well, hey, if you need anything from me, don't hesitate to ask. TTI has used, it was called OD Surveys Plus and used to be engagement surveys and that kind of stuff. That is changing. The gentleman who was doing OD surveys is retiring at the end of the year. And I talked to Ron Price, who's the incoming president. I've known Ron for a long time. That is one area that I guess they're going to spiff up or, work to make it a little bit more, more. It really isn't user friendly, but it wasn't supported by TTI for a long time. It was kind of supported by TTI, but you had to know where to go get it. And I think they're great tools. And at this point, I just I started another one today, and I wrote to the guy that's retiring. I said I need a Haskell special for so and so. 3 minutes later, I got it. So,
Have you ever done 360, like at the beginning of an engagement, and then coached the person for 6 months or a year, and then done another 360?
That's a great question. Yes, the simple answer is yes. A more complicated answer is a few years back, Haskell was getting ready to get a new COO. The current CEO was going to retire, and there were 3 internal candidates, and we did a benchmark for the position. So if you've talked to TTI about benchmarking, we did a benchmark for the position. I did 360s on all of the candidates, and then I spent 2 years coaching them, and I coached them on the things that came out of the 360, and then I did another 360 on them at the end of that 2-year process, and we ran another set of assessments against the benchmark, and that formed the basis of the report that I made to their board. So I spent I don't know, probably an hour and a half talking to the board about what my observations were and what my experience from coaching and what I saw as the areas that were that were strong and the areas that they let down. And I didn't make a choice of who I wanted to be CEO, but I strongly hinted at it. So yes, I've done those.
Chip, one last thought. Would you pick the 34 questions? You made it sound like there was a gazillion that you could have picked from to get down to the 34.
Mm-hmm.
How did you happen to settle on? Is 34 like a random number in your mind, or is it like, yeah, these are questions? All 34 questions were kind of getting at enough different things that that you felt like you had around it. To me, it would be damn near daunting to go through so many questions to try to narrow it down to, what's really kind of big picture stuff and what is picking fly shit out of pepper.
Yeah. That's a great analogy, and I don't think I'll ever forget that. And I'm probably going to use it, Doug. Picking fly shit out of pepper. Oh my God. So, what is that? Is that a New Jersey thing, or is that,
No.
is that a barbershop thing, or what?
That's a barbershop thing.
That's a barbershop thing, right? Yeah.
And by the way, I was talking with Mike Sleppen. For those of you who know
Oh,
Mike,
Sleppen, how is he?
He's good. He called me to wish me a Merry Christmas. His birthday is coming up in March. Do you know how old he'll be?
86.
90. He hits 90
wow.
in March. In fact, Wendy, I'm going to ask for a little help from you because I don't know whether I've got his actual birthday written down in my files someplace. But if you still have that from his original, if you still have that in your files someplace, I want to make sure that I don't miss the actual day. I know it's early March, but I don't know the actual day. But yeah,
we'll run into the office and check the old system for that. Yep.
Thank you. But
See,
yeah, amazing.
This has been a evolution. So when I first started doing 360s, I didn't use the OD survey tool, and I was just asking questions. And if you saw the reports that I used to write, there were like, they were like 27 pages, and they would just wear me out. And so to see where it's come after all these years. It's a lot more shorthand and not as intense. same thing with questions. So it may be, I think 2,800 questions or something like that, but it's 2,800 questions broken down into 20 or 25 different categories, and different ways of asking questions and that kind of thing. So it was pretty easy to look at the spreadsheet and say, okay, I want to pick, you know, the Chinese menu, 3 from column A, 2 from column B, and that kind of thing. The other thing is I started off with almost 80 questions, and I quickly found that I was asking double questions. I was asking, and people got really tired of answering 80 questions. So that just winnowed its way down to 34. And those are the questions that seem to be very important culturally to the customers that I work with. And so, you know, integrity is really an important component of most companies' core values. And it may not be integrity that's a core value, but it may be excellence or trust or something like that. And so that's where the integrity questions came from. The innovation questions, you know, most of the companies I deal with are not tech companies, but they thrive on innovation. And you know, they may not be bleeding edge, but they're more leading edge. All right, so I figure if we can hang out here for another 13 minutes, Doug will come up with another question.
So the values, I mean, the questions that you came up for the interview, for the comments, I take it those are on the sheet that you're forwarding to
Yeah.
to Wendy to forward to us?
Yeah, so the questions that I sent, that I showed you this on the sheet, were actually derivatives of the questions that the guy from GE taught me. And so you know, they've just slowly kind of morphed over the years, but they're pretty much the questions he taught me. He was a great guy, and he was the one who taught me how to write the reports, and he was the one who wrote the 37-page reports. And so, you know, but he was retired, and at 25 grand a pop, he did maybe 10 a year. So that was a nice little living for him. And, you know, he did that in between rounds of golf. All right.
All right, if there's no other questions for Chip, I'd like to thank Chip for spending his day with us this afternoon and giving us some good information. And since we're around that time of year, wish everybody a very happy and safe holiday season and a great 2022.
Merry Christmas to
Merry
those
Christmas,
who
Merry Christmas.
to those who
Christmas,
celebrate
happy
that way. And
holidays.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, since this is the last learning lab of 2021.
Got it.
Wow.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thanks,
Merry
Chip.
Christmas.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good to see you.